Hello, welcome to the Vineyard Church podcast. For more information, visit us at vkcwest.com.
All right, good morning, guys. How is everybody? Good. Happy Palm Sunday, my friends. This is one of those weeks in the rhythm of the church, of the year in the life of the church, where we pause and we remember like this celebration of Jesus entering into Jerusalem that comes about the week before his death and then his resurrection. And so it's like this moment where you start to see that something really significant is going on, something probably, as Cody was just saying, something worth sharing with the people that we know and love. I would sort of start by saying, I was thinking this week about a Midwestern trait or a Midwestern thing, and you'll probably have come across this. I'm just curious, how many of you are like sort of born and raised Midwesterners, like most of the time? How many of you transplanted from somewhere to the Midwest, and there you go, and you get to learn all our quirks, right? Kind of thing. So one of the things that I've noticed about Midwesterners is that when you are first meeting a person, you'll ask a question that's like, where are you from? And then it doesn't matter where they respond or name, like, oh, I'm from Philadelphia. If you have known or ever met someone from Philadelphia, what do you do next? You go, do you know Jeff? Doesn't matter, there's this huge city. Where are you from? New York. Oh, you've surely met Greg, right? Like, it's this Midwestern thing. Do you know my cousin so-and-so? Does he still live in Houston? Oh, no, that was like 12 years ago. I just thought maybe you might have crossed paths, right? Like kind of thing. One of the most quirky ways that Midwesterners create connection as we're first meeting a new person is we try and find who we have in common, right? And here's the thing, especially if someone is from a place and you ask them, do you know so-and-so? And it's somebody that you care about deeply. And they go, that's one of my best friends, right? What immediately takes place between you is that a relationship that might have taken a long time to form sort of naturally, because you have someone in common that you both know, you both love, and you both respect, all of a sudden, like the walls come down so much more quickly and relationship begins so much faster. Have you noticed this? If you and I have people in common, and especially if it's people that we really treasure the relationship we have with that person, we connect so quickly. I was sitting in Oklahoma City with a group of people that I work with, and we were like spending time with one of the new leaders that we brought on into our company, and we realized that we had someone in common as we're eating this dinner, and we spent like 45 minutes of the dinner just telling stories about that person that we had in common and laughing at all their quirks and telling all the stories about how they're just an awesome guy and the ways that they've been great to us in life and all this kind of thing. Have you had these moments where like you spend a long time like, oh my gosh, I got this one Cody Busick story, right? Like kind of like, oh, you know Cody? Well, I know Cody. Okay, get a load of this one time we were at this place, right? And you immediately start sharing the moments of life that you shared with that person. The thing is, the more that you love someone, the more likely it is that you are to share with other people about them. It'd be a really rare thing for me if you were to interact with me for a very long period of time before at some point I would bring up my family, my children, some of my friends, or the people that I've done ministry alongside. Like relationships would simply be a thing that I would share about that make me who I am. I saw this like really clearly several years ago. My wife and I used to just have a son and a daughter, and then, surprise, twins came along. So we went from like this real manageable thing, which was like each of us had a kid that we could focus on, and now we're in what people refer to as zone defense. And but when it was just us and the boy and the girl, Brooke, who had been a teacher at a private school called Pembroke that's like down off the plaza, she decided that she really felt called to stay home and raise our children. And I was a pastor at the time. It was like my only job. So like when you go from 2 incomes to just pastor income, like not awesome, you know? And so what we would do is like we had these side hustles to just like make enough money to do fun stuff like vacations or car repairs or whatever, you know, like the out of the normal budget kind of things of life. And one of the things that my wife did as one of her side hustles when she started staying home with our children is she used that sort of teaching background, and she did this thing where she tutored young Chinese children over the internet in English, right? So you like log on at 4 a.m. or whatever the time change made you do it, you know, kind of thing. And then all of a sudden up on the screen pops a 5-year-old like Chinese student who wants to learn English, and then she would teach English kind of a thing. And this one particular day, she's teaching about the names for family members, brother and sister and father and mother. And when she gets to the word for mother and shows a picture of like a mom in a family, all of a sudden the kid's eyes light up. And he goes, ah, and he spins the laptop around. So now the camera is facing his unsuspecting mother who's in a bathrobe and like reading glasses. And she doesn't know that she's being watched from across the planet. And all of a sudden she becomes aware that she's being observed. And she's like, ah, you know, like this kind of like, oh my gosh. And she spins the computer back around and starts like scolding the little guy. You know, Brooke can't tell what she's saying, but it's not great for him. And he's just like smiling so proud. Why? Because he shared the person who matters most to him with someone, right? And I remember driving to work that day after Brooke and I just like died laughing about this. And we're like, that lady had no idea some white girl was just observing her, you know? And we're just like, there's layers of how funny this thing is. And I'm driving to work and I hear the Lord say to me, Steve, isn't it funny that the more you love someone, the more you can't help but share about them? And when we look at Easter specifically, and what Jesus means to us as people who follow him, like the most treasured relationship that we could ever have is the relationship between us and the God who made us and loves us and sends his son to redeem and restore the relationship that we have between us and God and us and each other. Like this is the most precious relationship. Like I don't know how to, sometimes I reflect on this, I don't know how to quantify it. There's no way that I'm the same kind of parent that I am today if I don't have this life with Jesus. There's no way that I show up at work and treat people the way that I treat them. Like there's no way I extend grace to coworkers and patience and humility if I haven't had this life where Jesus has slowly but surely changed me over years and decades. There's no way that I'm the husband that shows up in my house and at least doesn't get everything wrong, you know? Like there's so many areas of life that get transformed by this relationship. And sometimes, like Cody was saying, we can compartmentalize, like this life of faith goes here, and then there's our spiritual life. And the beautiful thing that we see as we have this life with God is that we truly are called to share the goodness of God in the story of our life with whoever God puts us around. And whether it's friends or neighbors or coworkers, the truth is that God so loved people that even in the midst of all our brokenness, he sent his only son, that whoever believes or places their trust in him wouldn't die, but they would live in eternal life. And if that's not a huge deal, I don't know what is. And so I just want to take a moment and pray over us as we start moving into these Palm Sunday passages. God, would you give us in this room like a heart that is that remembers how enamored we are with you and the joy of a relationship with you? And I just pray that that would spill out of us in the week ahead, while people who are normally not even thinking about you or a life with you, they may actually start thinking about you around this Easter season. And I pray that as people's hearts become sensitive to thinking about a life with you, that you would place one of us next to them to play the Midwest Do You Know game and share about this Jesus who has changed us so profoundly. I just pray that would unfold in the life of people here in the week ahead. Amen. So Easter, what Easter is about, the cross and the resurrection of Jesus, is preceded by Palm Sunday. The interesting thing about Palm Sunday is it's a Sunday where we look at the expectation that people have of the Messiah. You guys notice when we were singing this song Hosanna this morning, how you're just singing this song that's, not even a Western word, Hosanna. And as we sing it, something just feels like the presence of God in our midst. The word Hosanna, for anyone that doesn't know what we were singing as we were singing that, Hosanna actually means, Lord, come save us, or be our salvation. That's what Hosanna means. And the question, as you think about Jesus entering into the city of Jerusalem and people celebrating and cheering and saying, Hosanna, Hosanna, and chanting, Hosanna, save us, save us. The question that we sort of are left to ask as we observe that is, if you've ever been in a crowd full of people and you're having a shared experience, and then you ask them after the shared experience, what was your experience of it? You know how people will describe it differently? Have you noticed this? Well, what I was experiencing was this, and what I was experiencing was that. Have you ever had a conversation with someone that you love, and you both knew the exact words that were said, but you both took different understanding away from it? Have you ever thought you were complimenting someone and you ended up hurting their feelings? Right? Communication is so fascinating, especially as it relates to moments like this, because a crowd full of people are saying, Hosanna, Hosanna. But the question is, Lord, save us, but from what? And what's interesting as you look at the gospel accounts of the things that lead up to this and the things that flow out of this moment of the triumphal entry, is that people had really varied expectations of what it meant for the Messiah to come. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but in relationships or in life in general, everyone has expectations of each other. Have you noticed this? The interesting thing, my spouse has expectations of me. I have expectations of my spouse. Have you ever in the course of marriage been your expectations of me are unreasonable? Yeah? Our friends have expectations of us, and we have them of them. We have expectations of our boss at work or of the people that report to us at work. Expectations are a normal part of life. The problem with where things start to break down by way of expectations is when they're not really aligned. The misalignment of expectations can create all kinds of confusion in life. There's an author named Pete Scazzero that has written a book called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. It's a course we actually go through together as a community. And one of the sections of Scazzero's writing, he talks about how when expectations aren't working, communication falls apart, right? But the issue is that most people don't understand how expectations work. And he starts to unpack it. Here's the problem of when expectations break down. So many times, expectations are unconscious. If you're not even sure of the expectation that you have of someone else, well, good luck to them meeting your expectations, right? Anyone ever been in one of those? Where you're like, since you don't know what you want, I sure can't read your mind and know what you want, right? Like that kind of thing. So one of the biggest breakdowns in expectation is if the person isn't even aware of what their own expectations on others are. The second breakdown in expectation is if the expectation they do have is unrealistic. If someone says to me, Steve, I would love to be in a friendship with you, and it would be easy for me to say, absolutely, I would love to be your friend. But if the expectation they have of friend in their mind is, so obviously we're doing all our family vacations together, right? You're like, oh, yeah, I didn't know when you said friend, you meant like never be apart ever, right? Which brings us to the next one. Many expectations that we have are unspoken. And because they're unspoken, there's never a chance, this is the fourth, for them to be, like many of them are unagreed upon. If you said, Steve, I'd love to be your friend, that means that we will probably do communal living like a bunch of hippies on some land that we co-own. I'd be like, yeah, no, that's all right. No, thanks, right? Like, we just met. That's not what we're doing, you know? But the interesting thing, if you want to clear up communication with people, look at those four things. Ask yourself, how can I move something that is unconscious to being conscious, unrealistic to being realistic, unspoken to being spoken, unagreed upon to being agreed upon? Yes, I will do friendship with you in that sort of way. The issue that we see with expectations is they've really not changed in sort of human psychology since the days of Jesus or long before. People have had expectations of what they thought God would be like and how he would interact with them. And many times the expectations that we see that people have toward God or toward Jesus in the scriptures, God has no intention of meeting those expectations. You look at through the Gospels, like maybe Jesus, people's expectation of Jesus, well, maybe he's a great rabbi, someone who will model for us what being a great rabbi really should look like. And then all of a sudden, Jesus subverts expectations by hanging out with tax collectors and sinners at parties, to the point that they start calling him the friend of sinners. He doesn't hang out with neat enough or tidy enough people to fill their expectations of religious and ritual purity. Well, maybe he's a great spiritual leader. Maybe he's the next sort of leader of this sort of group or spiritual sect within culture. Well, that expectation gets pretty quickly subverted as Jesus keeps calling the religious leaders things like whitewashed tombs. You're shiny on the outside, but you got nothing but death on the inside, right? Well, maybe Jesus is the next political leader who's supposed to help us as an oppressed people group to rise up and stand against the Roman Empire and the powers that are so dark and broken there. And then you see them trying to get Jesus to sort of lead a military sort of effort, and he just keeps going like, yeah, well, here's my advice, guys. Love your enemies and pay your taxes, right? Render to Caesar what's Caesar's. I don't know, it's all Roman coins. Pay your taxes. Render to God what's God's. Your hearts. Love your enemies. Pray for those who use you. Like at every point when you start thinking about, like even the disciples themselves have expectations on Jesus we'll look at that are misaligned with what Jesus is really here to do. If you wanted to do an interesting exercise, read the 4 Gospels and just make a little tally mark every time someone expects Jesus to be this way, but he's that way instead. You will fill up a sheet of paper quickly because humans' expectations of Jesus are all over the map. And yet it's inescapable that even though Jesus subverts the expectations that people have of him as the Messiah who would come, people continue to be drawn back to him. And they start to see in him things that they'd grown up learning and reading about all through the Old Testament. You see these moments from the Garden of Eden, and Jesus appears to be the answer to the brokenness that happens in the garden when God is, just shortly after the fall of people in the garden, God is interacting with the serpent, the deceiver. And in Genesis 3:14, he says this, "So the Lord said to the serpent, because you've done this, cursed are you above all livestock, all wild animals. You will crawl on your belly, eat the dust all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head and you will strike his heel." It's like God says, listen, I'm going to sort out the brokenness that you, the enemy, the deceiver, brought into the human condition. And all of a sudden people start looking at Jesus and going, is it possible that this Jesus could be the one that crushes the enemy and that sin and death don't reign anymore? Or possibly would they have remembered, as they're looking at this Jesus, Psalms like Psalm 118 that the Jewish people would have grown up reading and praying through the Psalms in their times of worship and in their homes? Would they have seen Jesus and the words of Psalm 118, "Open for me the gates of the righteous. I will enter and give thanks to the Lord. This is the gate of the Lord through which the righteous may enter. I will give thanks, for you answered me. You have become my salvation. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. And the Lord has done this, and it's marvelous in our eyes. The Lord has done it this very day. Let us rejoice today and be glad. Lord, save us. Hosanna. Lord, grant us success. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. From the house of the Lord we bless you, for the Lord is God, and he has made his light to shine on us." As they're looking at this Jesus entering into Jerusalem, could this be the Jesus who is the one who comes in the name of the Lord? Could this be the cornerstone that things are all built upon? Could this be salvation breaking in for people? Could this be the very light of God that shines on us? What expectations might they have tied to the Psalms that they'd learned for their whole lives? Or Zechariah, one of the prophets who specifically talks in chapter 9 of his writings, he talks about what the Messiah will look like when he comes. And he says some things 500 years before Jesus walks the earth that are so specific. He says this, "Rejoice greatly, daughter of Zion. Shout, daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly, riding a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." Like, what a specific picture that's actually being unfolding in front of them as Jesus rides into Jerusalem. And he says this, "I will take away the chariots from Ephraim and the war horses from Jerusalem. The battle bow will be broken, and he will proclaim peace to the nations." Like, all this broken fighting will be replaced with peace. His rule will extend from sea to sea, from the river to the ends of the earth. "And as for you, because of the blood of my covenant with you, I will free your prisoners from the waterless pit. Return to your fortress, you prisoner of hope. Even now, as I announce that I will restore twice as much to you." As they're beholding Jesus riding into Jerusalem, are they thinking, is this the humble king? What is the blood of the covenant that will be shed? How are people who are imprisoned going to turn into free men and free women? Is this the Jesus who brings the restoration that Zechariah is describing? On Palm Sunday, what we see start to come into focus is all of the varied expectations. Jesus starts speaking so specifically to who he is, what he's about, and the redemption that God is going to bring. And it's interesting as you think about the setting of Palm Sunday and the timing of the thing. In the rhythm of the Jewish calendar, this Sunday happens just in the days that are leading up to the Passover feast. If you remember what Passover as a Jewish tradition in the rhythm of their calendar is about, it's the remembrance of leaving slavery in Egypt and entering into freedom and a life with God. The Passover specifically, God, as he's sort of setting the Hebrew people free from the oppressive rule of the Egyptians, where they were working 7 days and no rest, and then 7 days and no rest, and 7 days and no rest, as they're working enslaved as a people. And then God moves in. There are these power encounters between the one true God and the false gods of Egypt. And the last of these 10, we call them 10 plagues, but really they're the 10 power encounters between the real God and the gods of Egypt. The last of those plagues is the death of the firstborn of any who don't turn to God. And the symbol and the sign of turning to God is that the blood of a spotless lamb would be spread on the doorposts of the homes of the people, that something pure and spotless would give up its life to restore the relationship between God and people, and then God would pass over that household, and that the judgment would be replaced by mercy and grace, that they would be passed over from judgment. And this is what's sort of looming. This is what's sort of like they're leading up to in this moment as we see this story of Jesus entering. Matthew 20, we're actually going to start not at Matthew 21 where we see Jesus ride into town. We're going to start in Matthew 20 and read a couple of things that lead up to that moment, because they start to frame for you where people's heads are at. The first question would be this: where is Jesus' head at as he's riding into Jerusalem? Well, interestingly, he tells his disciples exactly where his head is at in the days before. And it says this in Matthew 20:17. Now Jesus was going up to Jerusalem, and on the way he took the 12 aside and said to them, "We're going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified. And on the third day, he will be raised to life." That is incredibly specific, wouldn't you agree? Like, Jesus is very, very straightforward about what lies ahead of him. And it's not easy. It's deeply painful, the mission that's ahead of him. And is he turning away from it and running the opposite direction? No. He's telling them, this is what we are walking step by step by step toward. And then the most interesting, crazy thing happens between Jesus and a couple of disciples and their mom immediately after. Verse 20. Then the mother of, like Jesus has just laid out, here's what's getting ready to happen in my life. Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons, kneeling down, and asked a favor of him. "What is it you want?" he asked. She said, "Grant that one of these two sons of mine will sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom." He's talking about like cruel death. And she's like, "Hey, so when you become a big deal, can you treat my boys as the special?" You see the distance and expectation between like what Jesus is marching toward and what even the people close to him are expecting of him? She's trying to like secure cabinet positions. And he's saying, oh, there's going to be a lot of loss before there's a lot of victory. "You do not know what you are asking," Jesus said to them. "Can you drink the cup I am going to drink?" "We can," they answered. Okay, you definitely understand what you're saying. Sometimes my kids say yes to things, I'm like, you don't know what you're saying yes to. Jesus said to them, "You will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right and my left is not for me to grant. These places do not belong to those for whom they've been prepared by my Father." And when the 10 heard about this, the other 10 disciples catch wind of it, they were indignant with the 2 brothers, right? You would be too if it was like you realized that people who you'd been living alongside were trying to position themselves for the next big role in the company, right? They became indignant, and Jesus called them together and said, "You know that the rulers," he gives them a lesson on power in the kingdom. "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them." Here's how worldly power works. When you get it, you don't give it up, and you use it to keep other people small. This is how earthly power functions. Anyone ever seen something like that in their workplace or in the government or in any number of other places? The people who have power exercise authority. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be the first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Lord, save us. What do I mean by Lord, save us? I mean, give me a cabinet position. Oh, I will save you. Become a servant and lay your life down. See the reorientation of expectations? And then something interesting happens, because we have this Jesus clarifying what's getting ready to happen. Then the next thing is people who are near Jesus totally missing the point of what Jesus is up to. And then we have this fascinating story that is kind of like, there's an irony to it, right? As Jesus and his disciples were leaving Jericho, a large crowd followed him, and 2 blind men were sitting by the roadside. And when they heard Jesus was going by, they shouted, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." And the crowd rebuked them and told them to be quiet. So fascinating. There are blind people with real needs, and they're bringing their real needs into the presence of Jesus, and everyone's like, "Hey buddy, you're interrupting the church service with your real needs. Pipe down." And what is Jesus' response? As they get louder, the crowd rebuked them, told them to be quiet, and they shouted all the louder, "Lord, Son of David, come have mercy on us." Jesus stopped and called them. "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. "Lord," they answered, "we want our sight." And Jesus had compassion on them and touched their eyes, and immediately they received their sight and followed him. These 2 stories are set next to each other for a reason, because sometimes people who are very near Jesus lose sight of who he is and what he's about, what his kingdom is truly like. And sometimes the blind, "I once was blind, but now I see," is the story of people who haven't even been following Jesus. But what do you see happen? They not only receive their sight, but they follow him. I think these stories are set right next to each other after Jesus explains what's getting ready to happen for a very specific reason. And then we get to the passage where he enters Jerusalem. The sort of classic Palm Sunday passage. Chapter 21. As they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethphage, to the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go to the village ahead of you, and at once you will find a donkey tied there, with her colt by her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, say that the Lord needs them, and he will send them right away." This took place to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet. "Say to the daughter of Zion, see, your kingdom comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey and on a colt, the foal of a donkey." Even in Matthew's gospel, he goes, you're not supposed to miss 500 years ago, Zechariah talked about this exact thing. Just in case you need, like, you know in Lost, the old TV show at this point, that's crazy. In Lost, how there's flashbacks to the moment where all of a sudden whatever you just saw makes sense? It's like the gospel writers do this sometimes with the prophetic writings of the Old Testament. And the disciples went and did as Jesus had instructed them. They brought the donkey and the colt and placed their cloaks on them for Jesus to sit on. And a very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, while others cut branches from trees and spread them on the road. And the crowd went ahead of him, and those who followed shouted, "Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in highest heaven." And when Jesus entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred and asked, "Who is this?" And the crowds answered, "This is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee." Jesus predicts his death, crushes false expectation of people who are missing the point, gives sight to the blind, enters into the city, fulfilling the prophecy of Zechariah. And the words that the people speak are, "Lord, save us, Son of David," the one who would come from David's line and be the true Messiah. "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord," the psalm. Hosanna in the highest heaven. We don't have time to read Luke's whole account of this morning, but I'd encourage you this week in preparation for Easter, read Luke 19 and his story. One of the things that I love in Luke's passage is he adds to the worship language. He says, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory to God in the highest." When Luke talks about the kind of language that people are using as Jesus enters, it's the same language that you see in Luke's gospel when the angels are singing to the shepherds about Jesus' birth. They're like, "Hey, come find the promised Messiah. He's been born." And they enter in to this moment with the shepherds where they sing glory to God in the highest, peace on earth, goodwill to men. There's also in John's narrative another little layer to this story about the triumphal entry. And it's kind of fascinating because it talks about this very specific part of what do people expect the salvation that's coming will look like. John's gospel talks about this other layer to it. Meanwhile, this is chapter 12, verse 9. What we see is that Mary has just anointed the feet of Jesus. And in the house of Lazarus, who Jesus has raised from the dead recently. So his friend dies, Jesus raises him from the dead. The word of that starts spreading all over the place. Mary has anointed his feet like you would to a king. Judas gets bent out of shape because it's a real waste of money. Judas is the money guy, right? Verse 9 of chapter 12 says this, "Meanwhile, a large crowd of Jews found out that Jesus was there and came not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, who he had risen from the dead." Like they were at the funeral and now he's not in funeral condition, right? So they come to see not only Jesus who raised Lazarus, but see Lazarus with their own eyes. So the chief priests made plans to kill Lazarus as well. That's a tough go, isn't it? To die, to be raised to life, and then people already start plotting your death again. Like, these chief priests are rough, man. For on account of him, many of the Jews were going over to Jesus and believing him. Verse 12, the triumphal entry in John's gospel. "For the next day, the great crowd had come for the festival and heard that Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem. They took palm branches and went out to meet him, shouting, 'Hosanna! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the King of Israel.' And Jesus found a young donkey and sat on it, as it was written, saying, 'Do not be afraid, daughter of Zion. See, your king is coming, seated on a donkey's colt.'" The Psalms, the prophets, even the book of Genesis, they keep saying, this is that. What you're seeing in Jesus is that. And at first his disciples did not understand all this. Only after Jesus was glorified did they realize all the things that had been written about him and the things that had been done to him. Now the crowd that was with him when he called Lazarus from the tomb and raised him from the dead continued to spread the word. And many people, because they had heard that he performed this sign, went out to meet him. So the Pharisees said to one another, "See, this is getting us nowhere. Look how the whole world has gone after him." If only that were the case, huh? Look how the whole world has gone after Jesus. They see a man resurrected and all that they can do is lament. So peculiar. And yet for so many of us, when we lose the power of the story of the coming of Jesus, we start to live for other narratives. We start to make life about things that life isn't truly about. Anyone have these places in their world? You're like, wow, I look at my 401k daily. Haven't read the Bible for a while. And you start going, what is the narrative that my life is constructed around? I find myself watching this news station all the time to figure out which political leader will save us. But it's been a minute since I've worshiped and sung Hosanna. It's pretty easy when you see the Pharisees to just be like, these stinking jokers. But it's challenging if you really pause and take a minute. How easy it is to misplace your own heart, to lose the true north of a life with Jesus, to miss the point, and to be more grieved by the loss of earthly kingdoms and earthly things than you are by the loss of the presence of Jesus in some place of life. And yet, even knowing that the human heart has brokenness in it, and even knowing what was ahead of him, Jesus fulfills the mission. And this is what we start to look at through the week in between Palm Sunday and Easter, is what lengths would Jesus go to in order to take the brokenness that's inside of us and all the ways that we get tangled up and to untangle it, to set prisoners free and to redeem that which was lost. And so I'm going to read over us a prophecy from Isaiah's writings, 400 or 500 years before Jesus comes, that describes what we will see throughout Easter week as we read these narratives and what Jesus will have to go through. In Isaiah 53, the prophet writes about what it will look like for Jesus, the Messiah, to come. Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot, like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering, familiar with pain, like one from whom all people hide their faces. He was despised, and we held him in low esteem. Surely he took our pain and bore our suffering. Yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he didn't open his mouth. He was like a lamb led to the slaughter, a sheep before its shearers is silent. So he didn't open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. Yet who of this generation protested? He was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people he was punished. He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death. And though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth, yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life an offering for sin, he will see his offspring and prolong his days. And the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. And after he had suffered, he will see the light of life and be satisfied by his knowledge. My righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. Therefore I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he has poured out his life unto death, and was numbered with many transgressors. For he bore the sins of many, and made intercession for transgressors. It's pretty good news for us, isn't it? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever would believe in him should not perish but have everlasting life. And what would it cost? It would cost this.
Thanks for listening this week. If you are looking for ways to serve, give, or get connected, go to vkcwest.com.